those of you who don't know me, I'm a Denver-based writer, editor, and writing instructor. My work has appeared in Upworthy, Them.us, Vice, and Electric Literature, among others. I'm a staff writer at Sci-Fi Wire's feminist vertical Fangirls. I'm also a contributing writer at The Voice. And I work with clients and students both locally and globally through my editing and teaching work. So just so you know, there's a reason I'm here. I'm not just like some rando. I mean, I'm essentially just some rando, so it's okay if you're like, I'm gonna forget that person. I'm the person to forget. Of all of us, I'm just the moderator. But I want to start by thanking each of you for being here on behalf of the panel. It means a lot. We've all been thinking about this project for a while now, and it's so exciting to be here in person talking about it. And I want to thank you for taking the time to engage in a brainstorming activity. I hope it's got you thinking about the intersections of reporting and homelessness in the public sphere, because that's what we're talking about today. I know, spoiler, it's exactly what we said it was going to be. And if there's anything that you wrote on any of these that you feel like we don't address during the panel conversation, we are going to have a Q&A portion, and I hope you'll bring your ideas up. We are super excited to be here in conversation with you, so thank you for your contributions. This all started because Penn America announced their Press Freedom Incentive Fund. They wanted to engage writers and journalists around the country in deep dive conversations about local issues. I jumped at the opportunity to bring a powerful organization and its funds to support programming in Denver. And so I contacted my colleagues, including the lovely Sarah Ford from the Denver Voice and Tara Bannon from Park Hill Branch Library. And we're friends, we're colleagues, and I knew I had like an inkling of an idea, and I knew I did not have a full idea. So together we workshopped my reporting, homelessness, community specialist, what do we do? And turned it into something pretty cool, and I want to read you part of what we wrote in our grant application. Gentrification is a hot button word in Denver. Our city is growing rapidly, and as the developments and revitalizations increase, more and more of our community members are finding themselves experiencing homelessness and other financial and social hardships. At the same time, our largest mainstream publication has been bought and paid for by hedge fund owners who have gutted the publication's staff, turning it into another mouthpiece for progress at whatever cost. Meanwhile, reporting on homelessness has become a battlefield where the lives of those most impacted are discussed by people on both ends of the spectrum who generally aren't from the population being discussed. That is not to say that great reporting is not happening. It certainly is. We are pretty lucky in that regard here in Denver. But that things have become a little bit more complicated in how we talk about it, and a little bit more of a tinderbox. This is a much more explosive issue than I saw it as being a couple of years ago, 8, 10. This reality begs several questions about the intersection of the press and people experiencing homelessness, including how can one report on homelessness without bringing bias into the conversation? What happens when reporting on homelessness turns into advocacy for people experiencing homelessness? What's the ethical responsibility of those reporting on homelessness? How do we empower those experiencing homelessness to tell their own stories creatively and in journalistic form? Those are just the questions that keep me up at night. So today we're going to start exploring those questions. We're just going to get the conversation started, because if we're going to make significant strides around improving the lives of those who experience homelessness, it's actually going to take a lot of work, and a lot more than those of us in the room. But I want to thank you for being here and helping us continue that conversation. I also said start, but really, we're inheriting a conversation that's been going on for a very long time. And we get to be a part of that today together. I like to think of this panel as a panel of experts. They're experts in being them. They have totally different fields of interest, each person. And today we're going to have like an interesting conversation. Let's see where we line up and where we don't. While I'm here, I want to thank our event sponsors. I want to thank Lighthouse Writers Workshop for helping promote the event and being such enthusiastic advocates. I want to thank Denver Public Library for this awesome venue and their amazing event know-how. Make sure you don't miss out on their awesome event that's coming up on April 17th. It's You Can't Unfriend Everyone, Effective Dialogue with Your Friends and Neighbors. You could try to unfriend everyone, but I think they're still going to be there. So it's going to be an awesome conversation. And the library actually had to reschedule this because of weather, so I know they're really hoping to get the word out there. So if it's at all of interest to you, there are flyers on the back table. Make sure you grab one. Whoop. I also want to thank the Denver Voice for all their marketing, money managing, that's why they don't give me the money, and subject matter expertise. Finally, I want to thank Penn America. We simply could not have had this event without their support. Their Press Freedom Incentive Fund, an ongoing initiative providing support for writers, journalists, and local media outlets that are actively defending a free, independent, and robust press here in the U.S., funded this event. That was wordy, I didn't write that. And many like it around the country. You can learn more about the fund and how to apply online at penn.org. Genuinely, I'm like some random person who applied for this fund and got this money to do this cool thing. So if any of you can be some random person who applied for it, whatever ideas you have, whatever's plaguing you locally, really consider it. I'm not like paid by Penn to say this, I just like really thought it was cool that we got this grant. So, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists who will be addressing some pre-written questions to get the conversation going. Then we're going to go to the Q&A as we discussed. To my left, I'm going to start with Sarah and then work down. Sarah Ford is a Denver-based journalist and advocate who has covered local issues of homelessness and poverty for over 8 years with the Denver Voice. She's also the managing editor. To her left, John Alexander has been vending papers with the Denver Voice for 11 years. Prior to joining the Voice, Alexander struggled with drug addiction and homelessness. He is now one of the Voice's top-selling vendors, a published writer, and a public speaker. To John's left, we have Donna Bryson. Donna is a Denver-based author and journalist who writes about housing and hunger for Denverite.com, an online news magazine covering Metro Denver. Her new book, Home of the Brave, recounts how a small American town took on the big challenge of helping military veterans reintegrate into civilian life. To her left, we have Pete Simon. He's a Navy veteran and participant in Lighthouse Writers Workshop's Hard Times. Pete hopes to produce interviews with veterans and people experiencing homelessness to help inform others. To Pete's left, we have Sonia Falcone, who is a community resource specialist with Denver Public Library. She works to connect library customers to resources and supportive services related to emergency shelter, mental health, housing, food, education, employment, legal services, and more at 11 branches throughout the east side of Denver. I said 11. Her work also involves partnering with local agencies and service providers to improve resources and to advocate for social change on behalf of marginalized populations in Denver. To her left, we have Ben Dunning, who has lived in Denver for over 50 years and is one of the founding organizers with Denver Homeless Out Loud. At Denver Homeless Out Loud, he follows and updates the social media, the production of Get Loud magazine, and monitors media coverage of homelessness and housing both locally and nationally. Please welcome our panelists. So we are going to start with a very broad question that we all thought would be interesting for us to talk about before we talk. So how do we talk about homelessness?
So with the Denver Voice, one of the very first things that I learned in reporting is ideally, at least in media, the way that we should talk about homelessness is putting person first. So you've heard SE say, people experiencing homelessness several times, and that's to remind everyone, including readers, that this is not the status of a person, and that the status of homelessness does not encapsulate the entirety of a person. They are not homeless people, they are people who are experiencing this thing, just like we experience other things in our lives, both positive and negative, right? And so that's something that we always try to keep in mind in all the reporting that we do at The Voice. Unfortunately, I think from a media perspective, we don't always have that person-first approach, both in languaging, nor in the framework that we work in stories. Sometimes, and I think Recently, we've seen this with things like coverage of tiny homes or coverage of Initiative 300, both things that are going on in our community right now, and spurring a lot of discussion, and coverage from the media that sometimes people experiencing homelessness are reduced to caricatures, in a sense, reduced to stereotypes. You see media throw in, a line or a quote from the person they can find most exemplifies that stereotype of homelessness into their story. And I think that's unfortunately really reductive to how we cover this issue. And so I think ideally it would be to move from doing that and move media as a whole into really contextualizing the issue of the population and all the complexities that exist around that and within that rather than one large group. There are many subgroups and sub-realities, I think, for people experiencing homelessness. So I think that's unfortunately what we see, and something to move forward would be something towards person first.
Thank you. I've been speaking for about 6-7 years, public speaking. This is my first time speaking on a microphone.
Talk right into it.
I'm never starting out here, over and speaking too loud. But if I'm understanding the question in general, the most thing that I would like to say is people reporting, advocating, or however they're trying to find out what's this big phenomenon, if that's the correct word, it's all about homelessness, misconception, misunderstanding about homeless people, is that, well, there are people too. And you can kind of remember that many of us, well, all of us, when we look and try and approach this situation, remember that many try to first of all try to seek some kind of understanding. And understanding is a great power. I mean, we hear with relationships, try to get some understanding there, understand her better. Or if I can understand this better, I can do it better, I can do this and do that. Understand. And when we look at homelessness, we can understand and remember that as well as many people that have been homeless, many people that we all know, and different characters, no matter what extreme we go to, this way, what extreme we go to there, whether it is fictional characters, spiritual characters, and all those in between. Many of them I know were homeless, experienced homelessness, and they were great people. Every year, I mean, we would sit down and spend great time with friends and relatives and have dinner and exchange best wishes and gifts and things and celebrate the birthday of the most homeless person, most famous homeless person that ever lived, which was Jesus Christ. Children of Israel, many people that I know about her, read about her, so many of them I met. But again, it says Jesus Christ, and Mary, Joseph, children of Israel, myself, the 3 little pigs. Many of them experienced homelessness. And one of the most greatest common denominator all of them had, and that all of them still have it today when we become homeless, is coming up against circumstances and situations that was beyond their control. Show me a homeless person, and I'll show you a person that was faced with circumstances beyond their control. And if we can kind of remember to just start out seeking understanding of this so-called big phenomenon that we're caught up in. Who are these homeless people? Where did they come? How is it? Like, I mean, we'll be able to do some of everything, no matter how minutes.
So when I saw the question in the email earlier, I thought about I attended all 3 meetings we've had so far in Louisville regarding bringing tiny homes to Louisville. And there were meetings in which people were talking about homelessness, very loudly, a lot of anger. So we talk about it with anger and fear often. There was one exchange at one of these meetings where a neighbor in Louisville said, I want to know why these people in tiny homes are homeless. Is it because they're drug addicts? Is it because they're alcoholics? Cole Chandler from Tiny Village Organizers started by explaining that there's a lot of reasons why people are homeless. And it's hard to pin down. There's a lot of reasons why and a lot of responses to it because it's so varied. But the questioner went back to his original question. He said, thank you for telling me what is generally the case, but I want to know why these people are homeless. So people hold on to these stereotypes rather fiercely. And that's where, when we do talk about trying to put a face on that, I think that's where it becomes important. Maybe we can break through some of these very fiercely held stereotypes. And I think that's something we have to remember about stereotypes. People believe in them. And they are threatened by the idea of having to change what they've been thinking, what their parents told them to think. You really have to break through a lot of resistance to changing how people think and talk about homelessness.
I would definitely concur with that. There is a lot of scapegoating that goes on. There is a lot of misperception of the homeless community. Someone mentioned to me the other day that more than half of the community is working, but they're not making enough money to afford any housing. I don't think the people who are angry or are fearful of homeless people understand that. There's a lot of things they don't understand. I have an article here I brought in from my hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, about one Joe Murphy, excuse me. Joe was a celebrity in the state of Delaware. He was a 6-year state legislator. Very colorful character. Republican state legislator who was known for his ability to pull both Democrats and Republicans into the back room and hammer out compromises all the time. He lost an election and left politics, got involved with a friend of his in a business, which went pretty well for a while, but they went bankrupt. His marriage went south. He got a divorce. And so he said, oh, what the hell, I'm going up to the Rockies. That's what I've always wanted to do. He wound up in Denver. He stayed here for a little while and went to Albuquerque. Eventually, he picked up a hitchhiker and went to Phoenix with him and dropped him off at a shelter. And Joe went about his way and started getting involved in a small business. And after several months, things just crashed on him. And he had nothing. He had no money left. And he wound up at the shelter where he had taken the hitchhiker.
Wow.
Several months before. So there's Joe Murphy. He used to be high on the hog back in the state of Delaware. Everybody knew who he was. Living a great life. And here he is now in Phoenix, Arizona with nothing. And I bring this up because there are a lot of people like Joe Murphy. And I'd venture to say there are people here in Denver like him. And it's important that we get this story out when we identify people like that, the story needs to get to people in city council, in the state legislature, that this puts a human face on this issue, makes people take it more seriously. That way we get rid of the scapegoating, the stereotyping, and people start understanding that, we have people living in cars right now that somehow are working part-time or full-time, somehow are able to find a place where they can clean up, they can shower, and be presentable for work. But they don't have a house, they don't have a place to go to, they don't have a roof. Those kind of stories need to be out there more often. So.
I really believe in the power of language. And I think the way we talk about things, the words that we choose to use when we talk about things, not only reflects how we might feel about them, but can also over time shape how we think and how we believe. And I think that there is also power to impact others with something as simple as the words that we choose. So I really appreciate my colleague Sarah talking about this idea of person-first language, and really, all of my colleagues here on the panel have echoed this idea of how do we humanize, how do we really highlight that there are people who are experiencing homelessness, and how do we really uplift those voices and that experience. I know I certainly don't want to be defined by any single one of the experiences or by any single factor that might be happening in my life. I don't want somebody, certainly no stranger, but even somebody who's really close to me in my life, I don't want them to define me or use language that reduces me to a single experience that I have. And so I think we have the opportunity when we talk about issues like homelessness to really use language in a way that humanizes the conversation and that maybe encourages people, or even in just a passive way can act as a reminder to say, if I'm in conversation with somebody who's saying homeless people, homeless people, homeless people, I'm going to say, oh, do you mean people experiencing homelessness? And just continue to push that in a gentle way, and continue to stay committed to language that offers dignity and really puts kind of the human experience first.
Good afternoon, everybody. When we talk about about homelessness, one of the things that we do, and I think it's a mistake, is we treat homelessness like it's a personal success or failure. We'll treat it as either success or failure, or bad decisions, or bad luck. And so what will happen is, what we'll do with individuals is we'll go quickly to social problems of individuals and individuals' choices. And so what this does long term, when we talk about homelessness, is we let people who are accountable for systemic decisions that drive mass homelessness in the city off the hook. And they love that. They love homeless Christmas puppies, so that we can look at all the failures and the stories and the occasional success, because that takes them off the hook for why so many folks are experiencing homelessness on stage. And so what happens when we do that, people will get desperate for attention, and so they'll get it any way they can. And that happens in the homeless community as well. And these folks that are making a lot of money off of land and not being held accountable for, the cost that it has, failure to pay wages, they get away with it. So when we talk about homelessness, oftentimes what we don't say is important. The other thing is the forms in which we cover homelessness in general. There's about 3 or 4 basic ways in which we cover homeless stories. One is the Shake Bigfoot camera video. Oh my gosh, something horrible is going on out there, and it's crazy and it's messy. We do that. There's the one-off documentary where the documentarian gets all the notoriety, And while the information and the data and the things that we learn that way are important, but the community gets used as a vehicle for somebody with a skill to promote themselves. People watch the documentary once, maybe they learn something or not, but it doesn't wind up being a continuing story of life. Homelessness is really messy. And local news, when they typically cover homeless issues, the first thing they do is they turn their cameras to trash on the street. That's the first thing they want to call. You know, you'll see any kind of headline regarding homelessness, and they point the camera at the trash on the street. There was one day, I happened to be down in the Capitol area for some reason, and there was a bunch of these kids that had visited the state capitol, and they were doing a tour like kids do, and they had all these little brown bag lunches. And I saw one of them on the street, was too lazy to pick it up. And the very next day in the news, I saw a picture of that brown bag that was probably left by one of the students on a story about homelessness and homeless folks that were in Civic Center Park. But the thing was, is they weren't covering the story, but the dude was covering the trash. And in opposition to that, what happens is when we cover development stories, what pictures are shown there? Pictures of beautiful buildings. We don't show pictures of holes in the ground and the traffic that's done. But when we cover homelessness, you know, pictures of trash. So that's as far as I'll go on this particular question.
Thank you all so much. Some of the common themes I heard, but I wanted to repeat something you said, Ben. Homelessness is really messy. As a policy issue, as a reality, it's messy. And if it was simple, we would have solved it, right? Like this is the point. It's difficult, and we need 6 voices to talk about it because we have 6 different sets of experiences. Again, these are my experts. And that's why it matters. I also noticed that there were themes of being compassionate, people first, seeking first to understand, not looking at it as an individual choices. And then I saw the negative side. You know, there's a lot of conversation around anger and fear around homelessness. When I hear a lot of people talking about some of the current initiatives happening, I hear a lot of violent language about people who experience homelessness. And it's really heartbreaking. And again, as someone who's not directly affected, what a privilege, but the most I get to feel is heartbroken. I also wanted to add, you know, we're talking about using people first language, like there is no perfection. We make mistakes and we correct each other, and that's the point of having a community. Before we get to the next question, I just want to share a quick anecdote. One of the pieces I covered for The Voice was about homelessness, healing, and the arts. We have some very cool arts programs in Denver focused around homelessness and creating traumatic healing or healing trauma. The way I found it, that's a bad thing. What I said is not it. Around healing trauma and just experiencing joy. We're talking about a population who has been historically disenfranchised, treated, frankly, horribly. And these arts programs are just trying to bring a little levity, a little joy. And I was interviewing some folks at, I think it was at St. Francis. I did a lot of interviews, they all blurred together. And there was nowhere for us to step aside and talk. So I was recording, standing while the people who were doing the dance portion were dancing behind us. And, you know, I think about that moment a lot when I think about what makes reporting difficult. What makes bringing these stories to light challenging. And, you know, I don't have some big takeaway from my experience, just simply an illustration of, you know, and luckily this person was willing to have a conversation with me. I think most of the people I interview for other types of articles are not comfortable having a deeply personal conversation in front of 30 people they just met. And so I think, you know, that's one of the things I think about. And I just wanted to pose this question to the reporting folks. And then for the folks who are more on the advocacy and policy side, we have the next question for you. So if you have any to add, please do. But if you want to skip this one, feel free. But, you know, from your experience as reporters, what makes it difficult to do this type of reporting? And we don't have to go on the line anymore. If anyone's like really inspired, you can start there. I don't know, I'm like, dog, be inspired. I'm like staring at you. I don't know why I'm pressuring you, I'm sorry.
I think the first thing I do want to say is one thing that does not make this reporting difficult is you can talk to people who are living in homelessness. I sometimes get thanked or people point out, you talk to someone who's living in homelessness and you're sort of like, well, duh. It's a story about homelessness. We're going to talk to someone who's living in homelessness. When I was describing my beat, which is housing and hunger to a friend, she said, that seems very narrow. I was amazed. I find the hardest thing about my beat is all the stories I don't have time to do. So I think that the hardest thing about this is just telling myself there is time. Whatever story I'm working on, I have to give it the time. I have to make time for the extra interview. I have to make time to, to go see what I'm writing about, as opposed to just talking to someone on the phone about it. And there is time. But that's the hardest thing is to remember that there is time and to take the time.
I think, sort of just jumping off of that, so prior to, while I worked with The Voice, I also spent some time working at a local TV station as a writer producer. And it was very frustrating watching you be covering an issue about, whatever was the hot topic of that day related to homelessness. And we have our reporters going out at, 4 a.m. saying, okay, we're just going to go down to the Civic Center. And I think Ben hit the nail on the head saying that, cover the trash on the street. Because they wanted to go find, that shot and we would do a package. It was like a minute long, the live report, and very much distill a very complicated issue down into one, simple, quick news hit, okay, moving on. And it's very limiting. And that was actually the reason I left TV news, was because that was too frustrating for me personally. But that's, I think some of our most mainstream sources, that time, like Don pointed out, is difficult to find if you're doing an entire newscast, and this is going to be a 30-second hit, this is going to be 1 minute hit. If you're talking about, the limitations of print, you only have so much space. Your editor said you have X amount of words, we're going to get this, and it's really hard to condense and capture a deeply complicated issue when you're dealing with severe limitations on time, when you're dealing with limitations in spacing. All these things that just sort of come intrinsically, I think, with traditional journalism. And so that's something that, I think it turns to. There's other organizations like Denver Homeless Out Loud is amazing at putting their voices out there into the community and making these issues that are present in the minds of the community, and other alternate media sources like the Denver Voice.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. We have some others here in Denver, but then, this doesn't always have to come from traditional media sources. That we have, a growing movement of outside, non-traditional media sources, social media that are able to tell these stories. But I think that there's always going to be severe barriers in how we come up in telling these stories in more traditional forms of journalism, and just the way that is structured. So I think that's always going to be a challenge. So I encourage anyone to sort of also find their potential alternate sources.
Yep.
Sean, do you want to go or you want to? Go.
Go ahead. Well, I feel a little more comfortable now. But I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself a lot. But again, the great thing about homelessness, speaking about it, reporting it, anything, is understanding. Many of the people that I speak to have conversations with, and they tell me about things like trash in the streets, the drug addicts. I get the money and they go out for some and stood right here and watch them go and buy dope and drugs and alcohol and everything else. And the panhandlers and everything, and I try to explain to them, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I see it myself. But if they had a little more understanding about what they were talking about, then they could have some more of a solution about trying to take care of it. Because as I try to explain to many people that I get the opportunity to talk to, yes, what you see is true. But if you go beneath the surface, you'll find that everything you see is a byproduct a side effect of homelessness.
Yes.
Many things that come like drugs and alcohol and drugs too. You find a person, average people that are homeless in the streets are people that had homes and voted, paid taxes and everything else, and watched Monday night, Thursday night, I think it was Sunday night, we got a new night, watching football. At home, in their dens, on their TV. And when you find these people find it in themselves. Here I am, I lost home, I'm on the streets, my way of life, no job, and everything else. And that's quite a shock. That's one shock, one level. It's even more of a shock when they find themselves on the streets at night. No place to go. No way of whatever the world they find themselves in. Now, a person like myself, I had a bit of a jump because I became homeless, found myself on the streets. But in the streets, I grew up in the streets, played in the streets, and it was like going back, meeting old friends. Hello, River. Hello, Railroad Tracks. Have you talked to the Lincoln building lately or whatever? I was at home. This is a shock for a lot of people to be in this situation. A great shock. And then everything they hear, they read from our experts from the president on down, and I'm not just talking about Mr. Trump, many of the people in this office on down, all they hear and read is that things are bad. They're going to get worse before they get any better.
Wow.
We don't see anything that we can do right now. We're throwing up both hands. How do you expect this person to see how to get out of this world? And then many of them, they're there, going on to the next stage, they turn to drugs. And turning to drugs, they're crossing over now still another line, which is more dangerous, is into another world, drug addiction and alcoholism. And this person, when you turn to drugs, and what's the purpose of drugs? It's mind, mood, all control. Look at us, ourselves. Many of us, or all of us, we don't even do drugs. Not the so-called illegal drugs. But all of it. I got my drugs from the alley, where'd you get your? I got mine from the third floor. And this guy up there who was a doctor or whatever, he gave it to me. So it makes it better. No, it doesn't. And when you're out there at nighttime, or practically any time, days not that much women, and then you're faced with this fork in the road, which you're going to take today or turn to, and it's drugs comes out on top of your choice. It's very bad because now you find yourself fighting something else, some other deadly, and drugs are very deadly. And as you look at it, look at us. We go to the doctor. Many of us had toothaches or something before. Go to the doctor. Pain all on the side of your ear, down your shoulders, and everywhere else. Toothache, they call it.
Wow.
And then when you go into the office there and speak to the doctor, and he smiles, of course, because he hasn't really given you a good scare besides this dangerous situation you're in, these long needles and things and stuff. And he comes out and puts medicine all into you and everything else. And all of a sudden you have to get out of it. And I feel connected reality was when you first came into his office. Now he has his knees all in your chest, and he's drilling and smoke and everything is coming out of your mouth. And we looked around and saw anybody here with all the things that persons want to feel that we go through in a dental's office. I don't know who would give the person call 911 or leave, get out of here. But here we are in this situation, and of course there's the doctor, the dentist, and he wants to talk. You go fishing, and what's so, if I pronounce the word right, absurd, this is us. We buy these drugs and get these drugs in the alley. We're up here respectable with the doctor. And we try, we're so much wrapped here to the drugs, there are so much under its influence, till we try to talk back. You like fish? Nah, yeah, me too. What kind of fish do you generally catch? What's your bait? Nah. And we're not even criminals on the street. And then, so when you look at this person on the street that's faced with what he's been faced with, then the guy tells him, well, you want to nip or you want to hit or you take a draw of this or something. It'll help him get through the night. After a few of these nights, the average person begins to turn toward that. Next thing you know, he's getting addicted to it and picking it up in this treacherous world. And many, I'm using that example, many of the things that we see of whatever, all the way down to the panhandler, is following you down the street, trying to explain to you why he needs your spare change more than you do. All of these things. These are side effects, byproducts of being homeless. And the more that our reporters and people that are taking this position something understand what we are reporting on, what we're going to see or something or whatever, what we're trying to find out, the better job they'll be at it. And like go on, but thank you for that idea. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just quickly, I just wanted to say about the difficulties of reporting to try to establish comfort levels. To be, you first have to be comfortable with the person you're trying to interview and to make them comfortable. And the way to do that is to go into the interview with an open mind about what question you're going to ask at the outset, to put them at ease. Maintain eye contact with them if you can. If they keep looking away from you, then you provide some kind of verbal cue that lets them know that you are paying attention to them, and you are engaged with them. If it's just a, basic, you keep saying, yes, okay, right? So that they know that you're there, you're with them, you care about what they're saying. And eventually, after you hopefully gain confidence with them, you get them comfortable, then you can start asking more pertinent questions about, what got you here? Whatever.
Yeah, a couple difficulties in covering homelessness in the news. One is returning to the same source. So, like, if you have a beat reporter that's covering the Nuggets, they can go talk to the same person all the time. Or if you're covering a banker, or you're covering a city council thing, you can go talk to the same people all the time. You get the same source, you get the source about whether or not your source is going to be completely truthful with you or not, or whatnot. That doesn't happen out in homeless land. When you go talk to folks about what's happening on the street, oftentimes the source that you have that you're talking with may not be available. or they may not be there at all. And so that's a difficulty in consistency of sources when you're reporting, because that's one of the things you do is reporting. You have sources, and then you use that information in order to keep tabs on various different things. Another thing related to the homelessness is covered in the news. I've had that discussion with reporters. There were a couple of reporters that came out on a breaking story, and I had this little conversation with them, like, well, why are you covering it this way? I noticed that you guys cover these stories a few certain ways. Why don't you consider covering it different? And it was a breaking story, and then it broke, and they came back and said, well, we really had a big debate in the newsroom, but you know, the big money, the big decision makers, and the folks that take pictures of beautiful buildings went out, and they didn't. And then there was a second time I had a discussion with a separate reporter from a different television station, and we talked for a bit, we exchanged some emails, and then he kind of gave up on it. You know, each time I kept pushing him on, why are we covering things this way? You want to get to the truth, you want to get to the source, that's what you're telling me. Well, let's go there. But he, you know, so that's difficult, is willing to get people to invest in a messy, complicated issue. People will cover homelessness every once in a while, versus a sports reporter who's assigned to the Broncos, and he covers every little detail and has every little thing. We don't, and you know, covering a sports team is simple and clean, and homelessness is messy. So, yeah.
Thank you all so much. I love the different layers we're getting to, right? We're talking about policy level issues. We're talking about skill as a reporter, the ability to really know how to interview someone, and it is different depending on different populations you're working with, depending on your own identity as a reporter, your own familiarity with the community. And you know, I also, this is sort of underlying, and I think, John, you actually indicated toward this, a willingness to come from a place of not knowing. To come from a place of like, I don't already know everything about you just because I know some stereotypes, which John mentioned earlier as well. And I think that that's really, there's so many layers of what we need to address, and I think, but I really, really love what you had to say, John, about coming back to remembering this doesn't come from nowhere. People experience homelessness, and there are symptoms of that. And they're real, and they're scary, and they're hard. But that doesn't make anyone less worth living, right? Thank you all so much. And then this is more of a question for the advocacy arm of our group. I don't know why I said arm. So the question is, what makes it work or not? The type of reporting we're talking about to inform the work of folks like Sonia, Denver Homeless Out Loud, and policymakers. And then Ben was so good at helping me think about this the other way too, which is how does policy influence reporting? And so maybe we can start with Sonia and Ben talking about the first half of that question and then open it up to anybody else who'd like to address the reverse. So again, what makes it work or not for this type of reporting to inform your work, Sonia and Ben, and policymakers? And then in turn, how does policy influence reporting? Let's get this passed out to Sonia.
So, I think we can all kind of logically draw, fairly straight lines between, how social issues like homelessness are covered in the media, how that can, sometimes serve to shape opinions, how that then leads to people's voting habits, how things get funded, how programs are resourced or not resourced. And so I think, kind of large picture, that's one way that we can see potentially media and reporting impact in both positive and maybe not so positive ways to the work that I'm trying to do. I also see this kind of play out on a much more granular level with the folks that I'm working with. So my role is really to receive just about anybody who comes into the library who might be looking for information, support, answers, resources, things like that. So I have the privilege and opportunity to work with lots of different folks all across the east side of the city. And it's the right word is eluding me, but there's, this stigma that we know is there, we've already talked about, and it's so heartbreaking to see how sometimes this stigma can be really internalized by some of the folks that I have opportunity to interact with. So I'll hear statements from people like, I'm really, really sorry to be asking for resources, or apologetic about coming to connect with me, especially when I'm doing outreach. I'm like, hey man, this is what I'm here for, let's, there's no judgment here, and in fact, I'm seeking to come to a place of understanding about, where we can work together to make sure that you're getting connected to resources that might be helpful to you. But I see this bleed sometimes. People are incredibly resilient, and sometimes I see this stigma kind of bleed into a place where it's internalized. And then sometimes I see it in other library customers that I interact with. And this is not to villainize anyone, but sometimes I can see things like entitlement, or a sense of frustration, or I've had library customers say to me, you need to deal with this, or you need to, reconcile, an issue or a problem that somebody is experiencing because it's impinging on my experience in the library. So I think that, again, the way that we talk about things and who we are talking about those things with, right? Are we just watching news media on TV and then not taking that dialogue into our communities? Are we not asking deeper questions about, where is this reporting coming from? Am I just, taking a snapshot of a trash bag and assuming that I know the story behind that trash bag? So yeah, I think we have opportunity to positively and negatively kind of impact from reporting to both a policy level as well as, really granular interactions with individuals.
As far as things that don't work, is pretty much most of the stuff that comes from mainstream media. They operate from a mindset of stock photos. You can guarantee on the first snow of the season, there's going to be a homeless story. Whatever that is. There'll be some sort of Christmas special interest story about a homeless person going from rags to riches, or somebody doing great deeds out there. And the first cold snap, or whenever there's a cold snap, there's a homeless story. But it doesn't get followed up with. They follow up with stock pictures and things like that. It's never daily. It's hit or miss. It's always in crisis. We never get the full story. We always get a little snapshot. So what does work is getting information from multiple sources and multiple frames of view. As much as we can get from the homeless community self-reporting, much beyond their personal experiences, but the data that they have to share with us. So when you have 100 people sharing their stories, and there's 5 or 6 themes that reoccur in all of those stories, that needs to be listened to, because you don't have 100 people having the same things happen because they're all making the same decisions. It doesn't work that way. So that data is really important in things that work. Referencing data, re-referencing data, actually gathering data. When Denver Homeless Out Loud started, we found that it was really difficult to find reliable data on things that are going on in homeless land. We just don't gather it. The point in time count, which is a day in the year in which we try to count as many homeless folks that are experiencing homelessness, we never get to them all. There's not enough volunteers, it's all self-reported, and so the data is incomplete. And multiply that towards all the other sources of data out there in order to explain what's going on. So data is hugely important. The other thing is to know how to respond to various reactions. A lot of times when people don't get to tell their stories, they'll have the angry reaction. I'm so frustrated, I'm going to tell the world what I think about it, and I'm really angry. Or you get the sob story like, oh, I've experienced all this stuff, I want your pity. And to learn how to engage that, receive it, sit in it, sit in that. And also knowing that we're willing to sit in all of that kind of stuff, people that are afraid to share that stuff, get past that, and that will be useful.
Anybody who wants to either address this or answer, maybe talk about how policy influences reporting?
Okay.
Anybody? Yeah. I think you have thoughts on this.
Well, I already shared a little bit about the story where the reporters were having their debate in their editorial room, and policy influenced their reporting. I mean, it goes further than that. Some of the our policy gets dictated by folks that like to develop property. These are the people that go talk to our city council representatives and donate heavily to their campaign. And so one of the things that they do in order to dictate policy is they mess around with the language. So when we have a public health issue, they refer to it as a public safety issue. So for example, if you have a city and it's built alongside a cliff, and you want to protect the city, the appropriate response is to put up a guardrail so people don't fall off. But what property owners will want to do is they don't want to see certain folks, and so they're going to wait until they fall off the cliff, and then they're going to ticket them. And so what they'll do is like when we lock up all our bathrooms and people don't have a place to go to the bathroom, the policy is to go ticket people for not having a place to go to the bathroom rather than building the bathrooms. So that's where the policy thing gets in. And then when people wind up going to the bathroom outside, the policy thing is, oh, it's a public health thing. Well, why didn't you respond to the public health issue rather than doing this? And you can go on in that model. So that's one of the ways in which public health happens. But the reason that happens is it gets directed by businesses that don't want to see poor folks in their businesses. So they lock the bathrooms, they lock their services inside their businesses, and they hope everybody goes away. And if they happen to show up, then they're going to send police officers after them. So that's, and then you can just multiply that on, for example, people that have vouchers, guaranteed income to pay for housing, can't get into housing because the landlords expect 2.5 times rent. Well, they can't get 2.5 times that rent together on a voucher because it doesn't build up. Policy stuff. And so what will happen when the news reports that stuff, they will be sympathetic to the policymakers versus the victims of our economic refugees that we got running around out there. So
There's, how many people remember Wendy Bergen?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, you're Bergen. Do you remember what would happen to Wendy Bergen? Oh, wow. Wendy Bergen was a reporter for Channel 4, and she went undercover and played the part of a homeless person. And there was a big scandal about it afterward. But for a while, she got a lot of praise for what she did, and a lot of support for people in the community, for the homeless community, for a while, anyway. But it takes sensationalism to get the TV gods involved, interested in doing something on a grandiose scale like that. One of our TV stations now, Channel 4, is interested in doing Happy Talk or, trying to lighten up the 10 o'clock news at night. So if you want to have a homeless story on Channel 4, it has to be wrapped in some kind of a, something on the bright side. It has to have some kind of a bright tag to it. Channel 9 may have a little more of an emphasis on the hard-hitting side of things. They're not afraid to approach something that might shock people. The ordinance of, about restrooms or whatever it might be, the desperation of people, they'd be more likely to tackle that, maybe, I don't know. But, these kind of reports come and go, usually during what they call sweeps week. Where there's a lot of promotion ahead of time. Tune in tonight for, this kind of stuff. This is the kind of game that you have to play with the TV networks. You're more likely to get some serious reporting and some more detail on the radio side with the public radio folks. But anyway, that's my take on that.
Can you answer the question now, or?
Yeah.
We're gonna wait for questions,
Oh,
so hang on to that.
And what we're talking about today, what we're often talking about when we're talking about homelessness are inequality. And those are big historical, and that and writing about policy is very tough. What we're writing about is illustrates policy, I suppose, but it doesn't really explain the policy. And maybe for that, we need novels and poetry. So, read widely would be my advice.
I think just real quickly, sort of tagging on to what Donna was saying, is that often, we don't really have the capacity to approach this in the way that we should, from a media standpoint, and so, we need to get into things that can look at, in a more lengthy sense. Historically, welfare systems and how they're contributed to what the system is today, look into how we've gotten to where we are and further exploration. Adds a lot of contextualization to the stories that we're seeing on the news in terms of these policies. And I think also, from a media standpoint, I hope that journalists can be more aware of the stories that they picked to cover, and again, that languaging in how they cover those stories. So I think sometimes we see media outlets adopt, I think, sort of to Ben's point, adopt the languaging that comes from city or that comes from other policymakers, the issues that they're covering. We've seen this around covering the homeless states, covering the Initiative 300, covering tiny homes, covering the urban camping ban. If they're adopting that sort of language that is pushed forward by the cities or by developers without any kind of challenge to that, then that becomes the narrative, right? And that feeds back into the cyclical cycle of then how we, the public, adopt those issues and how we start to talk about it. And really it informs that entire storyline and the language that we're using, is the framework through which the media chooses to approach those stories. I was thinking about this earlier today because there was a story, I think it wasn't Globeville, I forget, but Channel 7 had read a story about an up and coming, neighborhood, or about the, safety in this neighborhood that's, now, developers love that kind of languaging in the media, right? Because when they see that and they go, right, and now we can adopt that, and we can come in and we can say we're making the neighborhood safer, and we're improving it, and it becomes the up and coming, the next neighborhood, and that contributes significantly to gentrification. So it's about choosing the languaging that we approach, in the way that we approach these stories, and not just taking sort of what's handed down from city or these sort of more official sources. And I think that's always a challenge for the media to sort of balance those two things responsibly and ethically. But it's really important because that comes so much of how we talk about policy, and how that contributes to what those conversations become.
One last, I can just do this real loud because it'll go fast. One of the things that's happening out in homeless news is the difference between reporting, editorials, and opinions. And you would be surprised how much stuff circles around as news that are nothing more than opinion columns by people that have access to publications just writing their opinion. But people are taking that as news, as it's not getting challenged in a lot of ways. Does the Democrat even have an opinion page? Yeah, I didn't think so, because I always see his reporting over there, so.
Awesome. I mean, thank you all so much, panelists. Everyone, please make sure you have a blue card and a yellow card. You're not going to yet, so it's okay if you are still passing it around. Sorry I wasn't clearer. So we're going to move into audience Q&A. So before we do, I want to go over a couple of ground rules. So we are lucky to be at the Denver Public Library, which they come up with ground rules. We might also call them norms, but we want to think about it this way. So we're here to have a kitchen table conversation, but no one dominates. So if you're going to ask a question, please make sure you have a question. As much as we appreciate comments and feedback and whatnot, let's make this time for Q&A, and then at the end, if you want to talk to a panelist individually, you can see if they want to hang out and chat. There are no right answers. We are going to disagree about that, and that is okay, but there are no right answers today, because we're here to have a conversation. Try to keep an open mind. If new information is being presented or a new question that you haven't heard before, your knee-jerk might be to reject it. Let's just pause that knee-jerk for a second. Help keep the conversation on track. Let's try and keep our questions germane to the conversation today. Let's really focus on what we've talked about. You've got an amazing set of experts. This is the time to ask them those questions that are burning inside of you. It is okay to disagree, but please don't be disagreeable. We're not going to attack anybody. We're not going to yell at anybody. It's okay if we get heated and have feelings. Those things are okay. But we're not going to make it ad hominem. And finally, we're going to have fun. Again, these people are all here because they're experts, they're awesome, and because they answered my email begging them to be here. So we are super grateful to have them. I'm going to sort of set it up like a Comic-Con, not because it needs to be, because I don't want to hold the mic. So when you have a question, just feel free to come on up and introduce yourself just so the panel can know you. If you have a question for a specific person, feel free to say, this question's for Donna, this question's for advocates, this question's for reporters, or this question's for everyone. And panelists, don't feel compelled to answer every question. If you don't have something to say, feel free to skip. All right, Virginia, I think you might have had a question. You want to come up and ask yours first?
Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Just hang on to the 3x5 cards for now.
Okay.
I'll explain what they're for, I promise.
So I can't find my glasses, so. So am I allowed only one
Yeah,
question?
you can ask one and then...
Okay, so as you can see, I have visited Ben's shop here. Got a big t-shirt. So, and I plan to come back. So, you were talking about this, the reporter who went undercover as a homeless person. Okay, yeah, I'm a veteran too. So, thank you for our service. What I'm thinking about is, what I see happening is, it's like poisoning people bit by bit, as if feeding them arsenic bit by bit, okay? That's what I'm seeing. So I was wondering what y'all would think about, and I've written this in my notes before. So what I hear here is murder me a homeless is what I'm hearing. So, because that's what's happening. I mean, and so what I'm thinking about, and I want your feedback on this, is, and I come from, I'm a ex-doctor's wife, I'm a widow. And I've been homeless more than 10 times in my life. Cycles. What was I say? Okay, so I know how to do the upper bit, right? Okay, so what I'm thinking about is doing the upper bit and doing this homeless person, murder me a homeless, you know? It's like, you know what I'm saying? Doing a real sarcastic thing on them. And sort of doing a parody on the people who are going homeless, you know? What's your opinion on that?
I'm not defending what they did. She was trying to create sympathy for homeless people in the general public, because she was she was trying to portray the life of someone who was searching through dumpsters for food, things like that, and you know, searching for places to sleep and all of that. So, but yeah, that's a real slippery slope to be on, because she's really not homeless. She's making a six-figure salary as a reporter for Channel 4. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's the value in doing that as opposed to getting a homeless person and wiring them, and you know, following them around with a camera from afar to record their experience, you know, and grabbing the same kind of experiences. I don't know. I don't know. Well, the answer is probably, you know, it takes less production time, and they can do this, you know, get it produced for their sweeps period coming up. You know, it's all for, you know, production time and trying to get things done in a reasonable amount of time, you know, for their expectations, for their clock.
Who's they?
Channel 4.
Okay,
Could I-
okay.
Could I ask a question?
In this case,
Okay, I'll.
but it could be any news operation that I was thinking about doing this. I don't think, since this situation didn't turn out too well, there's some other things happened, and she was discredited for doing some things. No one, this happened back in the 1980s, the late 80s, and no one in Denver TV, at least, has tried to do anything like this since.
6 months ago.
You're kidding me?
Yeah, from Channel 9, is Eric or Brian or something.
I didn't see it.
Scroll our Facebook page, we pulled it up, it's way back there, but.
I didn't see that one.
He went through, did the little thing, did a little ding on the shelters, like, oh, it's awful in here, but that was it. He was a young, new reporter trying to make his way into all of that kind of stuff. Also, this kind of thing was done by the mayor of Salt Lake City, and it led to something called Operation Rio, but that's outside of, yeah, that's.
Conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So Tom Graylish won a Pulitzer in 1986 as a photographer for doing something similar, documenting the lives of living with a homeless community and documenting their lives. And so
Okay, but he wasn't pretending to be a homeless person.
So my question, he lived homeless with them, but it wasn't, he documented other people's experiences.
Okay.
So is there a positive aspect to the media showing?
Oh no, if I go in with a microphone and I'm interviewing people and I'm spending the night on the street with them, I'm getting their story, I think that's legit. But I'm not, you know, I'm not posing. I'm not pretending to be, oh man, I'm down on my luck. I was a reporter, but all I've got left is my recorder, and I'm you know, blah blah blah. That's wrong. I think that's wrong.
The documentary information on that is important, but what's missing is the next step. So the reporter got heralded for all this information he brought to us when he spent some time, you know, doing the work. But what's missing is the follow-up, the day in and day out. I went out there and I explored, and I come back with stories of horrors and riches about what's going on out in homeless land, and we get educated.
Yeah, and for as far as camerawomen go, as long as you have permission from the people you're photographing, I don't see a problem with that.
Well, I've heard that you don't have to have permission in a public space.
You don't have to.
You don't
He's
have
saying
to.
that it's a courtesy to check.
You don't have to, but it's like, once I was at the Four Corners National Monument with a video camera, and I didn't realize, you know, my camera's running as I walked into a shed with Navajo women weaving a rug, and I, you know, the camera's running, and I'm talking, and I'm like, this is such beautiful work. How long does it take you? And before I could get my question finished, the woman said, you didn't ask me any permission to take my image, did you? And I'm like, oh my God, no, and I turned off. I said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was an issue with you. I'm very sorry. I didn't know that was a problem.
Virginia, do you have a second question?
You know, but I mean, yeah, it's all a matter of courtesy. It's a question of courtesy.
I'll do it later.
Okay, great. She's the mic.
I just wanted to say, when I photograph people, I get model releases and I pay them for their time, and I ask them in advance, can I use your image, and we use it in the right to rest, right to survive. We're using my photographs in there, all the campaign stuff, and I've asked them, I have model releases, I paid them for their time. So I think it is a matter of respect, and that someone takes the time to talk to you. It's a kind of a big deal, so.
Yeah, and for a microphone, you
Pete, do you
said,
mind if we move on to see if there are any other questions? Just so we can, I'm just gonna move on and see if there's other questions.
okay.
Did anybody else have any other questions? Please come on up. Yeah. Yay.
Hi, my name is Gretchen Crow. I used to work with the Denver Voice, and now I'm back. I just finished my
Welcome back.
first week back. I couldn't be more excited. So I'll build into my question. A couple of things that I just wanted to point out. When you were talking about stats and looking for stats, back in the day, I'm not caught up on my research, but back in the day, I noticed that mental health and drug abuse were not parsed out as pre and post homelessness. So, yes, and so talking to John's point that we don't know, you can look at trauma studies, et cetera. 10 days in, you've got severe PTSD that's categorized as mental illness, depression. So I used to talk to people. Another one, just to your point with language, in kind of a legendary previous meeting at work, I worked at the Downtown Denver Partnership, and we were talking about the term, let's talk about people without homes and are experiencing homelessness, and I got such pushback. And so I kind of went, do you own a home or do you rent? So the renters, and I changed it to the renters out there, and people got so, well, I rent in the ballpark, I'm not in Aurora, that kind of thing. But it really showed, you've got people in any socioeconomic group. You walk into a country club at a party and scan and know there's a bell curve of people that you will resonate with and you don't like. And it's the same thing with people on the streets. My question, so I just want to get this out because I have to leave before we finish. My question is, so we're talking about local reporting, okay? So, and I'm seeing this, but I'm also, kind of an underpinning is to take the fault off of the person and the homelessness. And what is the balance between, because you guys did really well with online, national, viral videos that I saw, I believe. And I think there's a real potential to affect local understanding, which could bump local news compassion, the reader's worldview of what is homelessness, but that balance between local and I say national, and I don't necessarily mean, I was going to say Dan Rather, but he's online as well. So, but the nightly news, but what could go viral, and what do you guys see as that potential to affect things here in Denver?
I think rather than viral responses and sensationalized responses, day in and day out reporting will get us closer to truth. Because the news feeds off of viral cycles, because first they'll print something one way, and then there'll be a reaction, and it's controversial, and they like that. That sells papers. They like the controversy. That's part of how they do it. But when it becomes mundane and regular, and it's based more in the facts. And one more thing on the facts is a lot, when you mentioned mental illness and alcohol abuse, most of our shelter system are drug and alcohol recovery programs. So when they report that 80% of their clients have drug and alcohol issues or mental illness issues, so that's two things. They've taken people who have depression because they're homeless, and combined that with people who have drug and alcohol and made a bigger number in order to make it sound more scary and all of that, and they don't parse it out. And you mentioned not before and after. I mean, there's a certain amount of folks that go homeless that don't have drug and alcohol issues, and they pick it up while they're on the street.
Absolutely. That I've
Yeah.
seen.
Did anyone else want to respond to the question? I did. Do you have a question to ask?
Yeah.
Okay, did anyone else in the panel want to respond to that question? No? Do you mind using the mic? No. Thank you. This will be the last question. I love you all, we just can't talk to panelists.
Okay.
And we have one more thing, so don't run away as soon as the question's over.
Okay, this is a very personal question, and it might be, I don't know what I say, but my dad was homeless. My dad was a homeless person from the time he was maybe 7 or 8 to about 20. And he said to me, don't ever pass up a beggar without giving him some money, or some money. And in my first, my 20s and 30s, I was giving money out all the time because it was what my dad. And then as the homeless population got greater and greater and greater and greater, I kind of thought, well, wait a minute, what should I do? And I did have a negative experience. I'm from Chicago, and there are a lot of homeless people in Chicago. And I got in an argument with a man in a wheelchair because I gave him $10 and he wanted $20. It's kind of crazy, but whatever. But I still don't know what to do about that. I don't know if that is insulting people, is that a benefit to people? And you drive down the street and people are on the corners, people are handing money out or they're not. And I just don't know what the correct thing to do is, if there is, and if it's just a personal thing. Because I personally think the homeless problem is a political problem. I think it is it's much more than, I'm a psychotherapist. I work with people with mental illness every day. And the people who end up homeless, it's a poverty issue. It's an issue for me of wealth taking over everything. And so that's just what I think, and I would like to do something. But giving someone $10, I don't know if that's an insult or a favor. So thank you.
Anybody? Do you want to? Yeah, please do. No, you don't. I can bring the mic to you. Would you like that? Okay.
No, that's a good question. But as you said, it was personal.
Yes, it is.
What you are looking at or trying to deal with this situation the way you feel personal, my suggestion is that first of all is that whatever you're giving, because that's what you're doing, give, and that makes it a gift. No strings attached.
Right.
If you feel this particular day, in this particular moment, that I have anything to give this one person, well, maybe I want to hold a little bit and give something and something next day. However you want to give it out. But you're giving it. It's gone. And when you want to, as far as when to say, add a little extra insurance to it, give it in the name of your God, whatever, Jesus, Jehovah Jireh, whatever. Give it in the name of God. Now, what he got was a gift from God to you. What he does with it is his things. To God. And, yes, and then God is not going to let him win by him thinking I'm suckling you or something or whatever. And God's going to not let you lose. Gift is gone. And that was a gift you had for him for that day. No time or strings on limit, putting a big load on your mind and feelings, and worrying about him, whether it was enough or not. It's what you have in your heart. And if you don't have it, there's no reason to feel guilty or saying, I don't have it today. Because God knows your heart. So that's what I feel, as you said, personal, we're talking personal.
I just wanted to say one thing. This is not just a Denver problem. This is a worldwide problem. When you think of the people camped in Tijuana who can't get through the border to this country, people are constantly, because of
politics and warfare changing countries, also changing cities in America. It's, what about the Syrian refugee camps? All over the world, there are refugee camps, people being forced out of their homes by climate change, because there's nothing to eat in Africa anymore. So, I mean, it's like this is the middle class application, of the problem, which is we're in this big, wealthy city, whereas people have pointed out it's all about development and growth. Don't get in my way. And but it is one fragment of a worldwide problem. Also, dividing homeless people into, or people who are experiencing homelessness, there are immigrants who are experiencing homelessness, there are people of different races and cultures who are experiencing homelessness, and something that's never mentioned by any of the presidential candidates, there are old people experiencing homelessness, and there are young people. It's an ageist thing too. So maybe for reporting, if you could embed the homeless issue in terms of some of those categories, how many people who are illegal immigrants are experiencing homelessness?
Just so you know, the term we use for people who are undocumented is undocumented. We don't use illegal. At least not in my room that I'm running.
Undocumented, what is that?
Having spoken with a couple people that have come through here in Denver from the United Nations, homelessness here in the U.S. works different than it does anywhere else. In a lot of poor countries or countries that are ravaged by war, you have refugees. They're experiencing homelessness and their life sucks. But in other countries that are wealthy, like the U.S., and we are some of the wealthiest, maybe even the wealthiest among them, they don't have homelessness, period, because they've built their societies different. We built our society that we can be filthy rich and have our streets full of third world poverty, either by being poor or because of refugees. It works different here. It's unique, and it's awful. So, homelessness is a worldwide issue, but it looks different here in the U.S. than it does anywhere else, which is why the UN is so concerned about what's going on. So the UN Rapporteur for Homelessness and Poverty came through the U.S., went through Alabama, went through California, studying this kind of stuff, and then snuck through Denver about 2 months ago and talked to us about some of these issues, and then they gave a report up in Boulder on something else, and they're telling us, I mean, from the UN's point of view, they don't. It boils down to what you already mentioned before about it's all about the property development and whatnot. So.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on, which is, I'm going to go all the way through that here, which is that there is going to be a difference in the way we talk about any issue the more we get focused on the local. And that was the purpose of today. There are absolutely whole world applications that I really appreciate you bringing that to light. And we have less control the bigger the circle gets, right? This is a fairly small circle and it can still feel like we have no control and no power in Denver. So, you've been given a yellow and a blue card. Does anyone not have one of them? Great, we'll get you one of each real quick, thank you. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna write the same thing on both cards, which is what is the action step you're gonna take based on today. Some examples that we've brainstormed are, you're gonna learn more about the right to survive bill, doing research on that. You might subscribe to The Voice or to Denver Homeless Out Loud. And then I'm gonna let Sonia tell you some other ones because she thinks she... Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Subscribe to the Denver. How terrible of you. Thank you for saying that.
I got one.
What's that?
Buy a newspaper for me.
Buy a newspaper? Like Virginia, that's beautiful. So there are lots of examples. It doesn't have to be this big thing. We want you to really think about what's this. We're going to ask you to leave the yellow copy on your chair. You don't need to write your name on it. We're just going to aggregate all of everybody's responses. And then take the blue copy with you to remind you of what you have committed to. Sonia, are you still comfortable putting on spot?
Sure.
Okay, our advocacy person.
Absolutely. So, just some really simple kind organic steps you can think about. First of all, I want to commend you all for being here, for participating in this conversation. Thank you for dedicating your time as well as your thoughts and your perspective. So I invite you all to consider taking some of these conversations, if you haven't already, back to your own communities, whether that's within your family, that could be dicey, and you know, we've got ground rules, so you can bring those back to your conversations with your family members, with your friends, with community members, with people you might really disagree with. So I encourage you to lean into those conversations. You don't have to seek for agreement, but seek for understanding. Seek for opportunities to share your perspective and to learn from the perspectives of others. I also encourage you to engage with folks in your community who might be experiencing homelessness. There's lots of ways to do this. You know, you can spend some formal volunteer hours, but you can also, you know, not pass someone by on the street without making eye contact. You can have a conversation. You can share a smile. You can share half of your granola bar if you feel so compelled. Although, you know, there's no pressure to do that. So I just invite you to continue to lean into these conversations with your community and with the local folks around you. Yeah.
I want you to hear what she's talking about getting involved locally. You have more power than you are giving yourself credit for. If you knew how a few people do the thing at Denver Homeless Out Loud and the kind of impact we have, regardless of that, I mean, we're a bunch of homeless and formerly homeless folks, and we're just starting to engage over and over by having people accountable. So get into those conversations. Trust her. If it doesn't go well the first time, learn. Keep going back. Keep going back. Keep engaging in those conversations. Over time, it adds up. And if you're looking for some encouragement, you know, there's a whole bunch of us that will, you know, give you advice or show up with you or whatever.
Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Can we have a round of applause for our audience? Can we have a round of applause for the library? Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you can take this conversation with you into your homes, into your community, and remember that we all care, and we're here. And all these people live in this city doing this work, and that is awesome. So they're going to be here for a little bit. Feel free to come say hi. You can leave your yellow 3x5 card in your chair. We'll collect them. Thank you so much.